I never imagined Karen Albright would truly go so far as to have my late brother's cherished Bronco hauled away from my driveway in the dead of night. But my response? Let's just say it turned heads. I hired a towering crane to hoist her immaculate luxury Lexus high into the morning air, right where the entire neighborhood could watch. My name's Gabriel North, 36, a single dad, and I've lived in this upscale suburban community for 5 years. It's ideal for raising my 10-year-old son, Eli. Great schools, quiet roads, safe environment. But that comfort comes with a suffocating cost, usually in the form of the local homeowners association. Or more precisely, its overbearing, control-obsessed president, Karen Albright. I own and run a mechanic shop called North Star Customs, focused on classic restorations and personalized builds. It's more than just a job, it's heritage, a passion handed down from my late brother David. We spent countless nights in his garage, grease on our knuckles, heads full of dreams. After he passed unexpectedly 2 years ago, his beloved '72 Ford Bronco, his masterpiece in waiting, sat untouched. It was supposed to be his next big undertaking, a complete frame-off rebuild. That mission passed to me. It became a vow, a living tie to his memory, and a legacy I wanted Eli to understand. Each dent I straightened, each corroded bolt I replaced, felt like bringing part of David back. The Bronco was far from finished, not a showpiece by any means. The original deep green paint was mostly stripped, revealing flat gray primer in places and bare metal underneath. The engine was a chaotic beauty, all wires and hoses, functional but wheezy. I was still wrangling the DMV to finalize the plates while restoring it. Yet it remained carefully parked in my driveway, well away from the curb, next to the garage. I often draped it in a heavy-duty canvas cover at night, shielding it from curious glances. It was a brute of a vehicle, a monument to David's passion, and I poured my heart into it whenever I could. Karen had always viewed my home like it was a blemish on her domain. It started subtly. One day I found a note under my door complaining about my front door color being non-compliant, even though it was a tasteful navy blue. Then came a citation about my work truck, my dependable, slightly dinged-up Ford F-250, being overly visible from the road, despite it sitting in my own driveway. I even caught her snapping pictures of my garden gnome for crying out loud. She loathed what she called working-class clutter, a phrase she once muttered at a block party while glancing disapprovingly at my grease-stained hands. Then, on a crisp Tuesday morning, I was outside gently dusting the Bronco's fender. I was admiring the solid curves of the old truck, already envisioning the day it would cruise down the street, freshly painted, Eli beaming in the passenger seat. That's when she appeared. Karen. Her platinum blonde bob remained immaculately still in the light breeze as she marched past, phone gripped in her manicured fingers, that cold spark in her eye. Her expression, usually locked in judgment, widened when it landed on the Bronco. I noticed the gleam of her phone's camera, followed by the unmistakable snap, snap, snap of the shutter. She didn't pause, just walked on, her gaze as frosty as if she'd spotted a UFO parked in her perfect suburb. My jaw clenched. I knew what was coming. Still, I didn't expect the brazen cruelty of what followed. That evening, the sunset colored Cypress Heights in rich oranges and purples. Eli and I were in the yard tossing a football, soaking up the last daylight, when he stopped suddenly, staring at the truck. "Dad?" he said, his voice small, tinged with worry. "What's that?" I turned around. On the windshield, glaring against the faded paint, was a bright fluorescent orange sticker. It practically screamed, "Official," an obnoxious square of neon slapped over the Bronco's quiet dignity. Not a ticket. Worse. Abandoned, derelict vehicle, subject to towing. Violation #47, immediate removal required. My stomach dropped. Abandoned? It wasn't just an attack. It was a personal blow. Violation 47. Like I was a serial offender, some community blight dragging down their spotless illusion. Eli approached, gently touching the sticker, like it might hurt him. He tried to rub it away, leaving a faint smear of orange on his hand. "Are they taking Uncle David's truck?" he asked, his eyes misting up, lips trembling. "We're not going to lose it, right, Dad? It's Uncle David's." That moment hit like a hammer. The panic and grief in Eli's eyes, the way he clutched my hand, terrified that the last piece of David was about to vanish. That's when it stopped being just about me. It became about them, about Karen, about this HOA's pathetic grip on power. I spent the next 48 hours gathering every shred of documentation I could. Receipts, title papers, photos of the work in progress. I even found an old photo of David proudly leaning on the Bronco, his grin a stark contrast to the knot growing in my chest. I had a letter from the paint shop confirming the scheduled work. The title was in my name. Everything was in order. I rehearsed my case in front of the mirror, reviewing every bylaw and policy. I was ready. The HOA meeting room was as bland as ever. Rows of bored residents, a few of Karen's loyal sidekicks lurking like stone gargoyles. Karen herself sat at the head of the long table like some suburban monarch, barely acknowledging me with a dismissive nod. When my time came, I laid everything out. The truck's emotional importance, the clear evidence that it was being restored, and the fact that it was parked on my own land. Karen had no interest in reason. She interrupted mid-sentence, her tone syrupy and condescending. "Mr. North," she drawled, a smug smile curling on her lips, scanning the crowd as if daring anyone to disagree. "We do respect your pastimes, but this neighborhood has expectations. High expectations. Your vehicle, in its current form, clearly violates our visual standards. It's an eyesore. Honestly, it's like bringing a salvage yard into our community. Cypress Heights' reputation is at stake." She paused, then jabbed the knife deeper. "It's a blight, Gabriel. A blight affecting property values across the entire cul-de-sac." She even gestured toward poor Mrs. Gable, who shrank into her seat like she'd been caught in the spotlight. "But Miss Albright," I responded, my tone calm but firm. "The bylaws mention no street parking past 48 hours and rules against visible damage for street-parked vehicles. The Bronco is in my driveway. It's being actively repaired. It's registered and insured." She waved her hand with theatrical finality. "The tag's already been posted, Mr. North. You've got 24 hours to comply or the vehicle will be removed. The board has already authorized it as part of our beautification initiative." She didn't ask for input. She didn't consult a single other board member. She just banged her gavel. "Next topic, Mrs. Higgins, your complaint about lawn decorations?" She flashed me a smug, victorious smile. I left that meeting fuming inside, struggling to keep my composure for Eli's sake. That night, I worked into the early hours, doing everything I could to make the Bronco appear less derelict. I threw a fresh, thick tarp over it, hiding it completely from sight. It was on my private property. Surely that meant she couldn't have it towed, right? Not without city approval, not without a court order. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my chest. Before I even looked in on Eli, I went straight to the window. The spot next to my garage was empty. The Bronco was gone. My heart hammered in my chest. She'd actually done it. The nerve, the pure, shameless boldness of it. I tore outside, scanning my driveway, the street, hoping maybe it had somehow rolled off. But there was nothing. No trace. Just a thin streak of tire marks left behind on the pavement. I started calling around. The city, the cops, every tow company I could find within 50 miles. No one had any record, no approved city removal, no police logs. This wasn't an HOA misunderstanding, it was theft, plain and simple. I stormed over to the HOA office, desperate for answers. Brenda, the association's secretary, a jittery woman who rarely made eye contact, practically sank into her chair when I burst through the door. "My truck! Where is it?" I snapped, doing my best not to yell. Brenda twisted her hands together nervously. "Mr. North, I'm not permitted to release that information." "Not permitted by who? Karen? My vehicle was taken without cause. I own it. I have the papers. It was parked on my private land." Eventually, she broke. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she glanced fearfully at Karen's closed office door. "Miss Albright, she authorized it herself. She said it was an urgent action. Something about an accelerated removal arrangement she had prearranged for special cases. She said you'd been warned and didn't comply, that it posed a hazard." Brenda looked around nervously. "She was adamant, Mr. North. Told them to make sure it was gone before dawn. Accelerated removal. Translation: Karen pulled strings with a shady towing company that didn't care much about legality. She had completely bypassed protocol to eliminate David's Bronco. The slow burn of anger inside me finally ignited into something solid and focused. This wasn't just about reclaiming my truck. I was going to reveal the truth. I was going to bring her down. I spent the rest of the day hunting for leads. I'm not just a mechanic. I know how to track things down. Rare parts, hidden issues, unusual failures. It's all puzzle solving. This wasn't so different. I started knocking on doors, gently asking neighbors about their security setups. Mr. Finch, a retiree a few houses down, had an old but reliable camera system covering the street. He owed me a favor for fixing his mower last summer. "You'll want to see this, Gabriel," he said, handing me a flash drive. "Something weird happened around 4 in the morning." I plugged it into my laptop. The grainy clip showed a dim street under pre-dawn skies. An unmarked tow truck crept into frame, lights off. 2 masked men jumped out and latched onto the Bronco quickly, but right before they drove off, someone stepped from the shadows onto Karen Albright's porch. Karen herself, draped in a silky robe, sipping tea like she was watching a fireworks show. She smirked, then gave a commanding wave to the tow truck driver. Then something else in the footage jumped out at me. Karen's pristine, sparkling white Lexus LS 500, her pride and joy, sat parked in her driveway, always in the exact same spot. The same spot it had occupied in every clip on Mr. Finch's camera from the past few months. It hadn't budged. Not once. Dust was collecting, the tires were sagging, a vehicle abandoned in plain sight, by her own standards. The hypocrisy smacked me in the face, and a plan, cool, calculated, and immensely satisfying, started to take shape. Losing David's Bronco was gut-wrenching, but the bigger blow was realizing Karen believed she could act with 0 consequences. I wasn't going to lash out like she did. I was going to dismantle her authority using the very rules she wielded. I took the first obvious, yet strategic, step. I submitted an official complaint to the HOA about Karen Albright's idle Lexus. But I didn't just lean on the no street parking past 48 hours clause. I mirrored the language used against my Bronco. Additionally, I wrote in my carefully crafted complaint, the vehicle shows multiple signs of abandonment and neglect, such as excessive dirt buildup, visible cobwebs, flat-spotted tires, and apparent fluid leakage under the engine, rendering it immobile and, per HOA visual maintenance policies, classified as derelict and an aesthetic nuisance on residential property. I attached a blurry screen grab from Mr. Finch's footage, clearly showing the Lexus in its unchanging spot, its bright white paint dulled under the grime. The reply came quickly, and it was as infuriating as it was predictable. Brenda sent a templated email the next day. "The board has reviewed your submission regarding Miss Albright's vehicle. Miss Albright has been granted a waiver due to private medical circumstances." Signed by Brenda, but dripping with Karen's tone. Dismissive, cold, and pompous. A waiver? My pulse spiked. I immediately fired back, demanding proof. "Show me the documentation. Show me the board vote. Show me any clause that places the HOA president above the same rules she uses to punish others." I called Brenda. Her voice wavered. "Mr. North, I'm only relaying what I've been told. Miss Albright claimed it was a confidential matter and that she's dealing with a rare condition. We're not allowed to ask for medical documentation." She sounded genuinely shaken. Days passed, then a week, nothing, no proof, just dead air. Brenda started dodging my calls. The board refused to act. Karen had them all under her thumb. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was the rules, bending and rewriting them to suit herself. Meanwhile, the Bronco saga continued rippling through my life, hitting Eli where it hurt most. He came home from school quieter, shoulders slouched. One afternoon, he threw himself into my arms, crying hard. "Dad," he gasped between sobs, "Kevin said our house is a junkyard. He said they took your car 'cause it was ugly. He said you're going to jail, and Mrs. Albright told his mom you're bad news." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. It wasn't just about the truck anymore. It was about the shame Karen was spreading, making my son feel unsafe, humiliated, unworthy. She wasn't targeting a vehicle, she was going after our dignity. Worse still, her backroom gossip began poisoning my business. My once busy garage grew quieter. Loyal customers stopped showing up. One longtime client, Mr. Rodriguez, a kind man and a regular, called with an apology. "Gabriel, I heard some things from the HOA president about your property, that you're disruptive, that you're damaging the neighborhood's reputation. She even posted a bad review about you on the local forum. My stomach turned. Word of mouth in Cypress Heights spread faster than wildfire, and Karen's version of the story, that I was reckless, untrustworthy, dragging down the community, was catching on. I was losing money, losing respect, all because one woman chose to make me a target. And my savings? They were slowly bleeding away. But every obstacle only sharpened my determination. On the surface, I was just holding it together for Eli, but behind closed doors after he was asleep, I worked tirelessly. I spent long nights sifting through municipal regulations, zoning policies, city ordinances, and every clause buried in the HOA bylaws. I wasn't searching for technicalities. I was chasing certainty. I needed a path that couldn't be questioned, something watertight, legally indisputable. And then I found it. A municipal permit for third-party removal of private property vehicles for nuisance abatement. It allowed specialized equipment, provided the action was initiated by the property owner or an authorized community representative acting under enforced bylaws. My formal complaint, the HOA's inaction, and Karen's clearly neglected vehicle lined up like puzzle pieces snapping into place. I submitted the application to the city. It was an extensive process, multiple pages requiring operational schematics, timelines, and a detailed explanation. I kept it concise but impactful. Petition to enforce Cypress Heights HOA Bylaw 14.3, subsection C, regarding derelict vehicles on private property. HOA failed to act on a valid complaint, citing unverifiable exemptions, leading to selective and punitive rule enforcement, causing demonstrable emotional and financial harm to the complainant. It was ambitious. But the city clerk, a young woman named Sarah who seemed familiar with the HOA's notorious reputation, offered a subtle nod of empathy. She even discreetly highlighted a forgotten clause on community standards violations that strengthened my filing, especially paired with a pattern of biased enforcement. I paid the steep, non-refundable fees, turned in the paperwork, and waited, a patient storm gathering strength. The waiting, that was the true test. Keeping Eli optimistic, trying to bring in new customers, ignoring Karen's smug stares from her SUV as she crept past our home. All while her Lexus sat there like a statue of hypocrisy, daring me to act. And then, the email I'd been waiting for arrived. Permit approved. Everything was in place. The time, 6:45 a.m. on a weekday, when most residents would just be stumbling into their kitchens or loading kids into minivans. This wasn't just enforcement. It was going to be a spectacle. A very public, very legal statement. I reached out to Frank, a crane operator I'd worked with on past custom builds. The guy loved drama. That morning broke crisp and golden. Eli, sensing something big was brewing, was up early, buzzing with anticipation. The night before, he'd helped me arrange the documents in our official folder, neat, sorted, tabbed. I told him, "Today we don't fight with fists. We fight with rules and a little cleverness." As dawn stretched over Cypress Heights, a distant, heavy rumble began to rise. It grew louder, a deep, industrial growl that sent vibrations through the soil and shook the polished lawns. Curtains parted. Residents peeked outside, eyebrows raised. "Is that a crane?" someone muttered. "What's happening at the Albrights?" And then it came into view. A behemoth of a crane, not just big, but monstrous. Its long arm extended like a steel giraffe reaching into the sky, emblazoned with the bright red logo, Precision Heavy Lift and Towing. It rolled slowly down the flawless road, tires hissing on asphalt, until it stopped directly in front of Karen, Albright's pristine estate. The air around us stilled. I was already waiting, standing boldly in the middle of the street, wearing a new, eye-popping orange reflective vest. In my hand, the document folder. Inside, the city permit, HOA bylaws, my original complaint, and the HOA's canned response. Everything was accounted for. Frank stepped down from the rig, gave me a grin and a thumbs up. His crew got into position. The hydraulics hissed to life, releasing a pressurized sigh. The oversized silver hook descended slowly, methodically toward Karen's Lexus. It hadn't budged in months, still collecting dust, still flat on the tires, still a symbol of smug authority left unchecked. The crowd began forming. Neighbors forgot their coffee, left their breakfast behind. They stepped onto their porches and sidewalks, eyes wide, murmuring as Frank's team secured the heavy-duty straps around the luxury car's frame. Then, slowly, like an unveiling, the crane began lifting Karen Albright's Lexus into the air. Higher and higher it floated, shimmering in the sunlight, spinning slightly, a luxury vehicle dangling absurdly above the neighborhood it once lorded over. Her immaculate lawn provided the perfect backdrop. It looked almost comical, like a spoiled kid's toy hoisted from a sandbox. And then came the scream, sharp, high-pitched, slicing through the silence like a siren. Karen. She burst out of her house in chaos, her robe flapping like tattered wings, hair disheveled, phone clutched in one hand, already dialing. Her usually smug face was twisted into fury and disbelief. Her mouth gaped silently before words exploded from it. "What the hell is going on?" she roared, hoarse from sleep and rage. She stumbled down the steps, bare feet slapping the grass, eyes wild. "Put my car down! You can't do this! I'm calling the cops! This is vandalism! It's a crime! I'll have you all sued to hell!" She stomped one bare heel into the lawn, tearing a small patch of turf. "I'm the HOA president! This is illegal! You'll regret this, Gabriel! My lawyer will destroy you!" Almost as if scripted, sirens began to wail in the distance, drawing closer, echoing through the rows of identical homes. Karen was reaching the peak of her tantrum, waving frantically at her levitating Lexus, when the flashing lights arrived. Act 3. Lines crossed, justice served. 2 squad cars rolled up to her curb, lights casting red and blue swirls across her white garage. Officer Miller stepped out, a seasoned veteran with tired but kind eyes, followed by a younger officer trying to make sense of the bizarre scene before him. "What's happening here?" Miller asked, his gaze moving from the hoisted car to Karen's flailing gestures, then to me, calmly standing by, papers in hand, Eli smiling brightly from our lawn. Karen pointed at me like she was accusing a war criminal. "Officer, arrest him! He's stealing my Lexus! This is theft! He's harassing me! This is a public disturbance!" She turned to the onlookers. "You all saw this! He's dangerous!" I stepped forward, composed, and offered the folder. "Good morning, officer. I'm Gabriel North, a local resident. This is a legal and fully permitted vehicle removal, pursuant to City Ordinance 7B3, subsection D, and the HOA's own bylaw 14.3, subsection C. I flipped to the right pages. The signed permit, the highlighted bylaws, my complaint, and the HOA's written refusal to act. Miller read carefully. He flipped through the papers, studied the stamp, scanned the language, then glanced at Karen's car, still swaying slightly in the crane's straps. Then he looked back at her, now red-faced, a vein throbbing in her temple. "Miss Albright," he said, measured but firm, "Mr. North appears to have followed all legal procedures. This permit is valid. The bylaws clearly allow for the removal of vehicles considered neglected or abandoned, based on complaints and evidence. In fact, it looks like the same language you used to justify towing Mr. North's Bronco just last week." Karen flinched. "But that's different. That was an old truck. This is my Lexus. It's not abandoned. It's high-end." She stomped again. "This is discrimination. This is personal." She lunged forward. Miller smoothly blocked her with one hand. He exhaled. "The rules don't make exceptions for luxury brands. And based on the photos and lack of movement, this vehicle qualifies as derelict. Unless you can provide immediate proof of exemption, this stands." I was prepared. "Officer, I requested all exemption records through the HOA. None were provided. I also have documentation showing Miss Albright attended public events recently. No medical emergencies reported." I slid over a photo from a local gala. Karen, radiant and perfectly healthy. Miller nodded grimly, turning to Frank. "Proceed with removal." Karen's face collapsed, red, shaking, incredulous. But the crane was already lowering the Lexus onto the flatbed waiting nearby, and that was just the beginning. Officer Miller carefully studied the documents, flipping through each page with practiced focus. He examined the city-issued permit, then reviewed the highlighted passages from the HOA bylaws, aligning them with the justification I had submitted. He turned his gaze to the crane and the Lexus now gently swaying mid-air in the calm morning breeze, then back to Karen, her face an alarming shade of red, a pulsing vein betraying her rising panic. "Miss Albright," he said evenly, his tone firm yet controlled, though hints of irritation crept in. "Mr. North appears to have followed proper protocol. He holds a valid city permit for this procedure, and he's invoking HOA rules that govern maintenance and removal of neglected vehicles, the same ones you personally enforced just days ago." He held up the permit for emphasis. "According to this document, the car meets the definition of derelict, stationary for an extended period, showing signs of neglect and reported by several residents." Karen stammered, eyes wide with shock. But that's my car. Those regulations. They're meant for junk. For abandoned wrecks like his Bronco, not my Lexus. That's a luxury vehicle, not some rusted heap." She stomped her foot like a child throwing a tantrum. "This is abuse. I'm the HOA president. You can't let him get away with this. This is discrimination against high-end vehicles." She even tried to push past Officer Miller, but he calmly stepped in to block her. He let out a low breath, his jaw tightening. "Miss Albright," the bylaws clearly say, "any vehicle deemed abandoned or derelict on private property is subject to removal." It doesn't mention ownership, brand, or make. You applied these rules against Mr. North. They apply to your vehicle as well. This is a civil matter, and Mr. North appears to be acting within his rights. If you take issue with it, I suggest you bring it before the board, or file a claim in civil court. Then he turned to Frank. "Carry on." Karen's complexion drained of color as the weight of the moment settled on her. Her outbursts tapered into a shaky whimper. "But I was sick. I had a valid exemption. That's why the car hasn't moved. It was a serious, rare medical emergency." She clutched at her chest theatrically, teetering like she might faint. "My doctor can confirm." I had expected this. My prior public records request, quietly suggested by Sarah from City Hall, had yielded exactly what I needed. "Officer," I said calmly, producing another document, "I previously requested proof of any exemption on Miss Albright's behalf, and the HOA confirmed there was none. Here's the email." I passed over the printout. "In addition, I obtained records confirming Missy Albright gave the keynote speech at an out-of-state HOA conference last week, and also attended the Cypress Heights Charity Gala 2 nights ago." I handed him a screenshot from social media. Karen, dressed to the nines, smiling beside other attendees. Miller looked over the photo, then back at the email trail. He glanced at Karen, whose eyes darted left and right. Trapped. Her dramatic fainting ploy fizzled out as she straightened up slowly, visibly seething with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "Miss Albright," Officer Miller said, his tone firm now, "without documentation supporting your exemption, this vehicle will be treated like any other under the bylaws. It's being towed to the city lot. You'll be able to recover it after paying fines and any fees tied to false claims." With that final blow, the crane swung into action. Karen's precious Lexus was gently rotated out of her driveway and lowered onto a waiting flatbed tow truck. Its destination, the city impound facility. There, she'd face daily storage costs, a stiff penalty, and administrative fees before she could reclaim it. She stood frozen, mouth half open, watching helplessly as her symbol of authority was taken away, leaving behind a bare, dusty square on her otherwise flawless driveway. Dozens of phones had captured every second, including mine. As the truck pulled away with its cargo, I turned to the crowd that had gathered. Some neighbors stood in stunned silence, others snickered quietly. A few gave me discreet nods, raised brows, and even a soft clap or two. I simply gave a quiet nod in return, a silent agreement that fairness had finally made a public appearance. Later that afternoon, I uploaded the footage to my social media account with a concise caption. "When HOA overreach meets a mechanic who keeps receipts. Cypress Heights, it's time for some fairness." The video exploded, instantly. In just hours, it gained thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands. Comment sections lit up. "Karen finally gets served. This is everything I needed today. Give this man a medal." Local news ran with the story. Headlines read, "Mechanic fights back against HOA president," and "Cypress Heights drama goes viral." I was bombarded with interview requests. I declined them all. The video did all the talking. Eli, who had watched it at school, came home grinning ear to ear. "Dad, everyone saw it. They're saying you're a hero. Kevin even said sorry. He said he didn't know how mean Miss Albright was. His face beamed with pride. That cruel comment about our house being a junkyard? Gone, replaced by admiration and confidence. And then, the twist I didn't see coming. A phone call from the towing company that had taken the Bronco. They'd seen the story. They were apologetic, almost stumbling over themselves. They admitted they'd been misled and offered to return my vehicle, at no cost. As a peace offering, they threw in a full professional detailing and a voucher for any future services. Even more surprising, they had a rare transmission part I'd been searching for, salvaged from a similar vintage model. Perfect for David's Bronco. The Bronco was home. Fueled by fresh motivation, I threw myself back into the rebuild with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in months. Eli was right there with me, passing wrenches, cleaning parts, lighting up the workbench. The engine came alive again with a strong, confident growl. We gave it a flawless coat of deep metallic blue, David's favorite. Chrome highlights added just enough shine. By the time the classic car show rolled into town, the Bronco didn't just look restored, it looked reborn. It was breathtaking. It took first place. Eli and I stood together, holding the trophy high, glowing with pride. When the next HOA meeting rolled around, the room was packed. Not the usual sleepy dozen, but dozens of faces. Some I'd only ever seen behind steering wheels. Word had spread. The video, the fallout, the uprising. People were tired of staying quiet. Karen showed up naturally. She had to. She entered late, draped in a stiff beige power suit that tried to scream authority but only whispered desperation. Her famous blonde bob was still there, though more rigid now, stiff with tension. Her Lexus was still locked in impound, draining her wallet by the day. She swept into the room like she expected a hero's welcome, but instead, silence. Utter, chilling silence. A few coughs, eyes turned away. Her once sparkling expression was now tight, defensive. She settled into her seat, stiff and cold, refusing to even glance my way. As the meeting kicked off, the typical monotony of procedural updates was underscored by a thick tension hanging in the room. The initial items blurred together, but everything shifted when the agenda reached the section labeled Community Concerns. That's when everything broke loose. Mrs. Henderson, a kind but generally quiet woman who lived 2 houses from Karen, was the first to stand. Clutching a crumpled tissue, her voice trembled. I've lived in Cypress Heights for 27 years, she began, visibly emotional. Last month, Miss Albright threatened to fine me $500 for having too many bird feeders that supposedly lured disruptive wildlife. They're small, decorative feeders, and I've had them forever. She accused my sparrows of endangering the neighborhood's environmental balance and claimed their droppings were a direct biohazard to her car. Her voice lifted in indignation. My car was parked nowhere near hers. And the birds, they're just sparrows, totally harmless. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the room. Karen slammed her palm on the table, sending water pitchers rattling. Enough! Mrs. Henderson, your birds are an invasive menace. They screech at sunrise, and your feeders bring in squirrels. Squirrels dig holes in our perfectly groomed yards. The bylaws clearly state preservation of pristine landscaping. She jabbed a finger toward her. You're deliberately sabotaging property values. And frankly, your entire lot reeks. Then Mr. Rodriguez stood, the same man whose calm demeanor I deeply respected. Miss Albright forced me to repaint my house last year, he said coolly. It was a perfectly acceptable shade of sandstone beige, well within the community guidelines, but she claimed it looked too rustic and clashed with her updated trim. She demanded I repaint it in alabaster white, a tone she personally selected. It cost me more than 10 grand and weeks of contractor work. When I presented proof from the bylaws confirming my original color was allowed, she told me, and I quote, "The rules are for the spirit of the neighborhood, Mr. Rodriguez, not for people looking to twist them. Your rustic look is unneighborly." He held up printed invoices and color swatches. This wasn't about regulation. This was harassment. Karen's face contorted. Unneighborly? Your house looked like a cabin dropped into a modern art gallery. It broke the aesthetic harmony of Cypress Heights. You were trying to draw attention, and I did what had to be done for cohesion. Her voice was climbing into a screech. And admit it, the alabaster looks better now. Then came the turning point. Brenda, the HOA secretary, typically invisible in meetings, stood up, hands trembling as she held a large stack of papers. Avoiding Karen's furious glare, she addressed the room. Board members, these are 27 formal grievances filed against Miss Albright over the past year. Complaints of arbitrary penalties, verbal threats, intimidation, and failure to respond to legitimate concerns. All of them were buried. Not one was brought to the board's attention. She placed the pile on the table with quiet finality. The room gasped in unison. Karen leapt to her feet, purple with rage. "Brenda, you traitorous little rat! That's private material. You have no right. Those are lies from disgruntled residents. Smears, fabrications. I'll have you dismissed immediately." "Sit down, Miss Albright," the HOA chairman, a stunned, pale-faced man named Mr. Thompson, pleaded, weakly banging his gavel. Then came my moment. I stepped forward to the microphone, the weight of every suppressed injustice, every insult Eli had endured, resting on my shoulders. My voice was firm and resonant, a stark contrast to Karen's shrieking denials. "I'm not just here tonight seeking justice for my Bronco," I began. "I'm here on behalf of this entire neighborhood. What happened to me, and to Karen's vehicle, revealed something far deeper. This wasn't about cars. It was about unchecked authority, about fear replacing community, about one person weaponizing rules for personal power, turning a shared space into a kingdom of one." I turned directly to Karen, now visibly shaking, eyes narrowed in rage. Then I swept my eyes across the room. Dozens of faces, some anxious, some hopeful. "I am willing to forego any lawsuit against the HOA and the board for the illegal towing of my truck, and for the financial harm caused to my business and family." A shocked wave passed through the crowd. Whispers, raised eyebrows, the air charged with tension. "In return," I continued, raising my voice slightly, "I ask for one thing, a permanent rule change, an amendment to the bylaws requiring a majority board vote, not just the president's say-so, before any vehicle can be removed. It must be backed by documentation, photos, and a city-issued permit. No more rushed removals, no more vendettas hidden behind the veil of aesthetic upkeep. We deserve fairness. We deserve accountability. This should be a neighborhood, not a dictatorship." The room stirred. Murmurs became nods. Nods became affirmations. The board members exchanged tense glances, realizing just how vulnerable they now were. The tide had turned. The community had found its voice, strengthened by Brenda's proof and the viral video the world had seen. The vote was called. "All in favor of removing Miss Albright from her role and adopting the proposed amendment, raise your hand." Hands shot up across the board table, 8 of them in total, resolute and unhesitating. 8 votes for her removal. 8 votes for a new rule that ensured fairness. Each hand a quiet verdict. Karen's hand never moved. It stayed clenched tight against the table, knuckles gleaming white, jaw set in disbelief. Her eyes darted from face to face, confused, betrayed, furious. She seemed to inflate with denial, and then collapse inward, like a balloon losing its air. The chairman, visibly relieved, wiped his forehead and announced the outcome. Applause erupted. Tentative at first, then louder, stronger. The sound swelled into thunder, a celebration of overdue change, of justice finally claiming ground. Karen rose stiffly, mouth agape in speechless fury. She lunged for her handbag, jerking it upward so hard it spilled open, lipstick, keys, and a compact skittering across the floor. She snapped it shut with a loud smack, kicked her chair aside, and stormed toward the exit. Her once flawless hair was now wild, strands glued to her forehead. Her proud gait reduced to an ungraceful stomp, like a dethroned monarch staggering from her crumbling castle. At the door, she turned and shrieked, voice shrill and cracking. "This isn't over! You haven't seen the last of me! I will return, and every single one of you, you'll regret this! You'll pay!" Her bloodshot eyes locked on mine for a long, chilling second before she threw the doors open and vanished into the night, her threats fading beneath the crowd's cheers and sighs of long-awaited relief. Cypress Heights had finally exhaled. The meeting wrapped up soon after. A quiet but profound sense of victory lingered in the room, a rebirth of community spirit. Neighbors shook hands. People who'd never spoken before made introductions. Plans were already forming for a new, more inclusive board. As I walked out, Eli skipped beside me, his little hand in mine, his face glowing with pride. One older neighbor, someone I'd only ever seen in passing, gave me a knowing smile and a wink. And for the first time in months, I felt something simple and real: peace.